Hey, Tatooine Sons family, last weekend was crazy with everything that happened. Star Wars Day and our double episode interview with the cast and the production team for Young Jedi Adventures. Go check that out if you missed those. There was the announcement of our new podcast network that we're launching with a bunch of friends called the Christian Nerd HQ. And then we had our first few live streams for it. And then, of course, there was the release of the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. BB Nate saw it 3 times over the course of the opening weekend. Sam and I actually saw it twice. So let's just say it was really busy all weekend and we're worn out. But we couldn't pass up an opportunity to put out a reaction episode to the final installment in the Guardians franchise. We actually recorded our thoughts while driving home from the last time we all watched it together. It's a great conversation. I think you'll hear things on it that you won't hear anywhere else. Sorry about the audio quality. We're working on getting that fixed for these conversations going forward. But I truly do believe you're going to love the discussion. So just imagine that you're in the car with us, and that's why it sounds the way that it does. And that's all coming up next after this quick message from Ashley at Fangirling Over Jesus. This is Tatooine Sons.
Hey guys, this is Ashley Cox from Fangirling Over Jesus. At FOJ, we believe in hope and light in the darkness and that you are not alone. We seek to unite and celebrate the intersection of the gospel and our favorite fandoms, and we get to do this through our social media, our podcast devotional, and our cosplay and fashion. And you can find links to all of that through our website, www.fangirlingoverjesus.com, through our social media at Fangirlingoverjesus, wherever you get your podcasts, and on Etsy. See you online.
It's true. All of it.
What is the name of the Porg on the Millennium Falcon?
Force is strong in my family.
What do you think his name is? It's a big moment.
I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
Maybe Turbis?
Do or do not. There is no try.
Turbis? Pablo, if you're listening to this live stream, that Porg's name is now Turbis. It's a good Star Wars name.
We're not done yet.
These guys recorded an awesome podcast called Tatooine Sons. Everybody was lit.
Third experience for Guardians of the Galaxy. Volume 3.
Yeah.
What do you think the third time? Is it the charm? Or was it too much?
I walk out more sad every time. Every single time I'm just like, oh my gosh. I feel like I'm like trying to cling on to this group still every time I watch it, and it keeps hitting me that we're not going to see them all together again in this form. So that's really sad, but honestly, it's such a great movie. So many great moments. It moves so fast, but it's a really long movie.
It moves faster the second watch. The first watch feels like an eternity because you're just waiting for the shoe to drop for everybody to die. The second watch, you're able to really take it in differently, and it moves a lot faster at that point.
Yeah, I mean, the head fakes in the trailers.
Oh my god, it was some of the worst that Marvel's ever done.
Yeah, and that was James Gunn's hope that would get faked out by it.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's the moment that happens like in the opening sequences.
Yes,
where they're walking through the streets and Nebula's carrying Peter, and it looks. I mean, that's in the trailer, and this happens in the opening, and it's just because he's drunk, out of his mind, drunk with it, which is much more appropriate. For Peter.
Is.
Yeah.
With that, and then even Rocket streaming. And then Peter screaming at Rocket. I mean, even then, when it happens, you think,
oh dang,
he's gone. At that point. With it, what do you think second time, Sam?
It's a lot easier to watch the second time. I'm not saying it's easy to watch. There's some really heavy moments in that movie, but overall, I mean, it is great. The things that people have been throwing around is best since Endgame, best Marvel movie since Endgame, and I'd have to agree with that. I think it is the best thing that's happened in these last couple of phases. I'd even wager to say it's the best Guardians.
Yeah, I'd have to agree.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, you're the Guardians aficionado. So.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree. It did feel like the best Guardians, to me at least. But
well, let's walk through that because Nate, you and I talked about this on the way home from the first time that we watched it. But I'm curious. I don't think that we've talked about Guardians as much on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I even understood kind of your connection to these characters in this story until we were coming home from it on Thursday. So why don't you kind of take a second to explain why the Guardians is such an important thing to you?
So it came out in 2014 is when the characters were introduced. So I was, how old was I at that point? I was literally 9.
Oh, we literally watched it the day after your
exactly. So
party.
We had a birthday party for Guardians that came out. So I turned 9 and it came out the day after. So already my birthday is connected to this movie. So it was a huge deal for me. And the first album I ever bought was the Awesome Mix Volume 1, and I listened to that thing all the time.
You downloaded that on iTunes,
I did,
right?
and I have it memorized to this day still. And then the second one came out, and we went to a double feature for that. I was able to convince Mom to go to a double feature, which was something she was really not wanting to do, but I really wanted to go to it, and so we did for a midnight premiere. And I also bought the second Awesome Mix, and it was just like, I grew up with these characters, and kind of like, throughout my childhood and everything, I was like growing up with the Guardians and seeing them progress and all this stuff. And so, I get why everybody was like, this was a send-off, because it really felt like a goodbye to those characters from my childhood. Exactly. And so, yeah, it's rough to see it, but honestly, it was great to see those characters. Perfect goodbye for them. And one of the scenes that hits me hard every time is that end scene where they're kind of all dancing and all that stuff, because it's happy, but it's insanely bittersweet, because you're just kind of get that sense of finality from it, and it hurts, but it's a perfect way to end it, because the first movie was all about dancing and had a dance off to beat the villain and all that stuff. So it was really just a very great way to end that part of these characters. It's awesome.
So, high points, like favorite moments in it. I'll start with you, Sam.
I can't think of a specific moment right off the top of my head. I mean, the hallway scene's cool. I feel like everybody's got to have a hallway scene at some point, But
that was it was a hallway scene. But that scene, the second time through, made me get Suicide Squad vibes more than anything else. That they've done.
It was very much Suicide Squad.
Really brutal.
Yeah.
And gory, and just
it was very Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
But you liked the hallway scene?
I thought it was cool. I mean, hallway scenes are always cool. It's just kind of it's that kind of, I'm trying to think of the word, but like, it's just a showcase of a character. Daredevil, there's one, every other episode, and they're always awesome. You got this one, and then even Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker got their own hallway scenes that were super cool. So
Mando got one.
Right? I mean, they're just always pulling a really cool showcase of what a character's capable of.
And I loved how it was one shot.
Yeah, that was a
really awesome cinematography in that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it was filmed in one shot, but it was set like
it was set like a one shot.
Right.
Yeah.
Anything else that stood out like this when you think about the movie, like moments?
Obviously, this is Rocket's movie.
It is.
Even though he's not in it for a lot, just because he's dying. But
spoilers.
Well, that's kind of a given here. But his scenes and stuff are really powerful. But there's one scene, both times I watched it, when Rocket is dying on the table, and they just got the code or whatever from that guy. He's dying on the table, and it's Chris Pratt's performance there that just rips your heart out. I mean, he really seems like he's losing a friend right there.
Desperation.
It is hard to watch. You got to give it to Chris Pratt's performance in that scene. That stuck out to me both times watching.
It boggles my mind that Andy from Community. Or is that Andy? What's his name? What's his character's name? In Parks and Rec. Park and Rec.
Oh, Andy in Parks and Rec.
No, not Andy. It's his character.
What's his character? Chris Pratt's character.
Oh, yeah, Andy. Yeah.
It is Andy?
It is Andy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's Andy in Parks and Rec, right? It's amazing to me that goofball of a character or actor became, such this character, this in it, and that's Star-Lord, especially kind of. Let's just be honest. This was the redemption of the character.
They even mentioned that in that whole or the elevator
scene.
He's like, yeah, you're basically almost doomed half the universe. Like, okay, so he acknowledges he screwed up.
Well, I think that has to go back to the comments that James Gunn has had about how he really disagreed with the decisions that were made in Infinity War.
Because he didn't get a say.
Right? He didn't get a say in it, and they just they did it, and he didn't think Peter would do it.
Right.
Is what he said. So it kind of allowed him to get his little 2 cents with the universe.
It worked well, and it wasn't too much of like a rewrite in a way.
Yeah.
Like he still acknowledged that stuff, but he was able to work with it and go on. He even, he still played with the whole not obsession, but his inability to move on from Gamora. I mean, that was a central plot point for his character in this movie, and that was the whole reason that he screwed everything up in Infinity War. So he built off of the things that were established in those movies. He didn't just throw them away because he didn't like them.
Yeah. Nate, what's you kind of touched on some different pieces of it, but what was your highlights, your great moments in it?
Highlights. I mean, this whole movie is great. I mean, from the opening scenes to the last ones, there really isn't a complaint I have, so it's hard to choose favorite moments from it. I really do like the scene where Rocket decides to save all of the animals.
Yeah.
That is an amazing scene for Rocket and his character, and finally hitting that growth of where he is and finding that purpose, which really was one of the main themes of this movie. And it was just that one really pulls my heartstrings every time, just to see how he reacts to that, and just this sense of, I need to save these people, because in the way of saving these animals, he feels like he's saving Lila and Teef's Floor and himself. Yes, he's saving those people that he wasn't able to save. And so that's really one of my favorite scenes. The end, of course, is another great scene. I love that. Some people might say it drug out for a little too long. Yeah.
I kind of felt that way the first time in.
But I really do feel like it was perfect, because we needed a long send-off, because in a way, while this movie was long, I really didn't want it to end, because that meant that the Guardians were done. And so I just wanted it to keep going, but it ended perfectly with Rocket, and it was just, the whole movie was fantastic.
In a lot of ways, it feels like Endgame,
It really did feel like Endgame.
For me, Endgame really hurt, because Iron Man, well, he died. At least none of your characters died.
Not yet. I can't.
That's true. Yeah, they're still around. That's because they can die.
It's going to be a struggle.
But, that whole scene, he died, right? But then there was that whole funeral sequence at the end, and that went on for a long while, just to kind of help you, process, and then also hurt you some more with the cheeseburger line and stuff, But I get it, they have to kind of like give you that grace. They're like, yeah, we're gonna rip out your heart. Let's give you a minute to come to terms with it. But James Gunn did a phenomenal job.
He really did.
I mean, who better to send off the Guardians than the one who introduced them?
Right. I don't think there would be anybody else I would rather send off the Guardians. There couldn't be anybody else. I mean, this is James Gunn's team. It's his characters, and so you really can't give it to anybody else to send them off, because I just don't think that they would have done it right.
What about Gamora in this? Because obviously this is the post-Endgame version of Gamora,
pre-Endgame,
which is also it's pre-Guardians, pre-Guardians of Gamora with this. Obviously, that time jump that happens with Thanos bringing her with him to the end of Endgame there,
Right.
in that sequence with it. What did you guys think about? I'll start with you, BB Dave. What did you think about this version of Gamora in this film?
Well, it allows her to be her own character when they want her to have her own adventures and everything, not tied to Star-Lord, not tied to the Guardians. She's different, of course, but I really did like what they did with her character. They gave her a nice arc. They gave her some kind of getting closer to the Guardians, getting closer to Quill towards the end there, and that was satisfying, but they didn't just jump there like it was always meant to be or anything like that. No, there was some closeness, but it didn't get to the point where we saw it in Guardians 2 or anything like that, which I did appreciate, because there was it would have just felt rushed and off if they did that. And so really Gamora in this movie helped Quill and his arc as much as it drove forward her own arc. I think that some of the things that Gamora says to Quill in this, and when she's getting very frustrated and throws him into the wall, and why are you so afraid of something in you that I need to be something that I'm not, or something like that. That whole line really, I feel like, makes something click in Quill, that his character was Gamora, and he understood that now that she's really gone, he needs to figure out who he is and who his actual family and his friends and everything is. And so that's why he went to go get his grandpa and leave the Guardians, because he needed to figure out who he was without Gamora, finally, instead of just kind of holding on to that character. So in a lot of ways, it was well done.
Mantis was, trying to get him to figure out. It's like, you've got to learn how to be your own person outside of who you're in love with. Yeah,
right.
You got to find yourself. And, it makes sense. I think everything that happened in this movie does drive him towards that point.
Do you think that Mantis's storyline in this, she spends a lot of time communicating with Quill, trying to get Quill to go back and visit, meet his grandfather and all of that. But do you think in some ways that she's projecting what she's processing internally on Quill, and that's the way that she's kind of, because at the end, she goes off to figure out what her purpose is, like you were just saying. Do you feel like that's kind of what she's, by trying to help Quill, she's processing what's going on inside of her?
Yeah, I mean, they both got fairly similar stories. I mean, they've got the same dad, but he could never figure out who he was because he never had a family, for real. He was with the Ravagers, and that was his life. He was always just told he was a Ravager when he was growing up, right? Mantis, she was always told that she was whatever ego needed her to be. So it's, not too dissimilar. They were ripped from their families and told what they were supposed to be their whole lives, and never got a chance to really find it for themselves. So I can see her projecting that onto, well, not projecting, but just empathizing with Quill.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of her whole shtick.
I loved I noticed it in the first time I viewed it, but it was even more impactful the second time. Because we're going back to Gamora and Quill, when they part ways at the end of the film, Gamora says to Quill, "I'm still not who you need me to be," and Peter's like, "Yeah, but who you are is pretty good." Right. I liked that line, because that was his way of releasing her, right? To be herself, right? At that point as well,
where she really is embraced by the Ravagers.
There's a theme. I know that you talked about it on the live stream with the Christian Nerd HQ yesterday, Nate. But there's a running theme throughout this entire film, and it really comes to a climax at the end of each one of the characters trying to find their individual purpose with this. What did you think about that theme? I'll start with you, Nate, or Sam, excuse me. I had to get that wrong because, it happens every time.
Well, I think they kind of needed to do that in order to be able to have the characters go their own way. Otherwise, it feels weird. Each character is still tied to the Guardians. What are they going to do on their own? So having them figure out their place, or figure out that they need to figure out their place, allows them to be able to split up at the end. And I think they did well with each of the characters in the time that they were allotted. You know, I mean, it helps that we've had 2 previous movies plus, you know, Endgame and Infinity War to learn about these characters. Obviously, you couldn't have them go from meeting up to splitting up in one movie. So then you got that on its side. But regardless, it did a great job of showing where they were at the start and where they needed to be in the end. So I thought that was very well executed.
What do you think about the idea of purpose in this DVD?
Yeah, I thought it was very prevalent, and I really loved that being the theme, because kind of we need to know now. We don't know what the purpose is for these characters in the rest of the MCU itself, and so it was very important to kind of have these characters try to find their own way and find who they really are and what they're meant to be doing. And it was really, I mean, even the villain was about purpose. He felt like his purpose was to make everything perfect, and he was wrong in that. But, I mean, we see all these characters, like Rocket, now he has the purpose of leading the Guardians and actually being a Guardian of the Galaxy, which we find genuinely, he was probably the most genuine Guardian of the Galaxy out of all of them towards the end of this series. And like Sam said, we had 3 movies to kind of fully get to know them, including this one, and then, you know, Infinity War and Endgame. But even in this movie, they each have their personal arcs alone in this movie, and it was a long movie to be able to tell that. But going to this, it just shows how well done this movie was, that they tried to do that with Eternals, and it didn't really work.
Explain what you mean by that.
The character, they tried to introduce characters and have character arcs for each separate individual character in Eternals, but that just didn't work. They didn't really do well with that. Either they killed them off or had some of them on for a very short amount of time and just had no resolution to their personal arcs, and then focused on like maybe 2-3 of the Eternals to actually have an arc, and then even then it wasn't that satisfying. But in this one, every single character that was sort of important had their arc. I mean, Kraglin had his own, and even Cosmo to an extent. And
Adam Warlock.
Right, Adam Warlock had his own arc. And none of those characters were super main characters for this movie, but they all had a journey to go through. And it was a satisfying conclusion by the end of it. And so it was really well done to find that we can have those character arcs shown and find that kind of each person understanding their purpose, and it was really well done. I really did think it was a great theme for this movie.
So this movie's been criticized by a lot. We know people that walked out of the movie with that. We know people that loved the movie but had some criticisms about the first use of the F-bomb in the MCU with that. But really, it's very dark. There's a lot of very dark, heavy content. The animal abuse and everything in that. But it's also, I think it's probably more noticeable for me the second time.
Yeah,
it is really violent. Like, we see this violence, and it's usually against, you know, the hell spawn, so you don't see it like it's not human on human, but it is a really would you agree or disagree, the most violent MCU movie up to date? Is there anything that has been this intense?
I'm trying to think about this movie. Maybe I wasn't paying enough attention. I mean, yeah, the hell spawn was gross, but they're monsters. They were violent, but it's not like disturbing. I'm trying to think about what else. I may have just like glossed over.
Well, I mean, little things though, like even Quill. It bothered me the second time. I noticed it the first time, but everything is happening so quickly the first time. You don't have a chance to process stuff while it's happening. The second time, I don't remember the guy from Superstore. I don't remember his character.
That's where I've seen it.
I don't think I can get his name, just a recorder.
Yeah,
a main recorder.
Trying to figure out where I'd seen that guy. Thank you.
Yeah, it's Superstore.
Okay, so Quill, you know, he begs for his life, right? And Quill looks like he's going to spare him, and then he's like, you know, you spoke too soon, or something like that. And then he casts him out. he kills him.
Oh yeah.
Like he flat. That's a. Think about Quill's character and words in this very movie. We don't do that. When they're on the organic planet, meat planet, whatever,
Orgo Spire.
He keeps telling Gamora over and over and over again, we don't do that. We don't do that. We're Guardians of the Galaxy. We don't do that. We don't do that. And I know that they end up having to fight and kill and all this other stuff, but in that moment, it was like, that felt like it crossed a line for Quill.
Well, I get where you're coming from. But yeah, I kind of disagree because I feel like at that point, I mean, we even see it with Quill dropping the first F-bomb. It gave a sense of urgency to this. At this point, Quill is completely not paying attention, not worrying about anything else. He is stressed to the max about Rocket dying because they're getting really close to him actually dying. His lungs were filled with fluid by that point. So he had minutes almost to live, and so Quill was really trying to go urgently, and then the recorder and all of this stuff mocks them, and you have to think the recorder basically almost signed Rocket's death. I mean, because he took that passkey out, and so if it wasn't for that recorder, they would have already saved Rocket, and so the recorder almost killed Rocket, and so Quill was pretty much done with him at that point. He mocked him and all this stuff, and then begs for his life when he didn't give that option to Rocket. And so he felt like he just was done with this guy, which I understand. I was frustrated with him too.
I mean, the thing about the Orgo Corp people is they didn't do anything bad. They were just workers, really. I mean, they just had an office job or a security job. I mean, they didn't know any better. At least that's kind of the vibe I got. The people working for the High Evolutionary knew what was going on and didn't care. You know, like the reporter guy, like you said, Nate, was almost, it seemed at some points like happy to see Rocket go and stuff. You know, and at that point, I think Quill's like, yeah, they've earned it. The people at Orgo Corp, they were just doing their job. I mean, it's hard to excuse killing in any sense.
It's different than battling against people shooting at you and all of that versus an unarmed individual that you are killing simply because in all reality the end justifies the means. The only way I'm going to save Rocket is to kill this guy.
Yeah.
And so the second viewing, I saw that scene and was like, I didn't like that. I really didn't like that with this. But overall, the film has a lot of violence. That's kind of an example of it that I was in here. But we haven't talked about it, but get your feedback. I've already heard Nate, so I'm going to start with you, Sam. Give me your thoughts on the High Evolutionary.
Oh, I hate it. I mean, they did a great job.
In a good way.
Right. Well, I don't know. They did a great job of making a villain who was completely and utterly unsympathetic. He had no, emotional backstory where he had this great motivation because his mom died or something, or like Thanos, his planet starved, so he's going to kill half the universe or whatever. This guy just didn't like stuff, so he was horrible about it. He's just evil. I mean, there's no redeeming qualities to him whatsoever. Like, up until the end. Like, there was no goodness in him. And, it helps to drive the point home when he's cruel to cute little animals. I mean, that's kind of one thing that I think everybody's kind of inconsistent about. Or, not inconsistent, but, like, it shouldn't be that way, but you watch a movie, right? There's memes about it everywhere. Humans die, whatever. As soon as you see a dog die, everybody's like up in arms about it, right? I don't know why everybody must be messed up. Dogs are cute, right? A great way to drive home the point that a person is evil is to just have unadulterated violence against animals with no remorse.
Because that goes back to they're completely innocent.
Right.
Right. They can't do anything.
Right.
And they're cute.
So you like he's a villain you love hating?
Right. I mean, he's Nate said something earlier, and I can't quite place it, but you were something about the fact that like he doesn't like things. He doesn't want to make things perfect. He just doesn't like things the way they are. Well, that's the complete counter argument to what's happening to each of the characters in the Guardians, right? They didn't like where they were, so they fixed it to become perfect. Not that they hated themselves. They just learned how to accept themselves and work with it, which is the opposite of what the High Evolutionary does. He literally, like, at least it seems like, rips parts of his own body out just to make it better because he doesn't like them, as opposed to learning to live with it and work around it. So it's not only do you love to hate him, but he's a great antithesis to the rest of the story.
Cool. Nate, what did you think about the High Evolutionary?
I thought he was a great villain, and to have a great villain, you don't want to feel remorse or sympathize with his cause. I didn't. I thought that he was deranged, and for good reason. And he was completely mad and wasn't trying to fix overpopulation. He was just evil, which is a good villain. You want an evil villain. And so they did that perfectly with this movie. He was crazy. He yelled a lot. It must have been difficult for that actor, but he did a great job portraying this character. I hated him every time he was on screen, but not because I didn't like the character. It's because he was a good villain, and I was supposed to hate him. When he's
mocking Rocket for crying,
right?
Like, oh my gosh, that was horrible. Like, yeah.
Sam, what did you think about the commentary that the High Evolutionary has throughout the entire movie regarding kind of this idea of God?
Yeah.
It's a really common thread for him.
Well, I mean, what more can you say he's got than a God complex? I mean, he creates things, which he doesn't really actually make anything. He just takes something that exists and changes it, which isn't really creation. That's not a God. But,
that's why he wanted Rocket's brain, because he was actually able to pure invention, is what he said.
Yeah. But, the whole creating species and populating a planet just because he wants to make something, or raising that planet because he didn't like his creation. Obviously, you could infer that there were maybe some jabs to Christianity there.
Explain what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, there was the one line from Gamora where she's like, what kind of monster destroys this whole planet or something? You can go to the flood in Genesis. But there's a very stark difference between the High Evolutionary and God. So, one might think that that's the case, but the difference being this person just can't accept himself, so he tries to make everything else better or perfect. And when it doesn't turn out the way he likes it, he throws a temper tantrum and blows everything up. Not that the creation itself was flawed, it was that he didn't like it in
right.
this movie, So
he has a line in there with Quill in their last kind of big dialogue with that, which says, there is no God. That's why I stepped in.
That was against his own worker.
Yeah.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When she was trying to take over the ship or whatever.
Yeah.
What do you think that communicates, that mindset? I'll start with you, Nate. What do you think that's coming across in that?
I think he truly believes that there's no creation except for him. And so he has to, like he said, step into that role. And honestly, it completely accepts the fact that there has to be a creator, no matter what. He feels like that he has to be one, though he doesn't think there is one at this point. But in this storyline, in this character, in the High Evolutionary himself, he really does feel like he is good and he's a god and he's doing what's absolutely necessary to make a perfect society. But what he's doing is, somebody mentioned this on the podcast yesterday that I was doing, he's an imperfect person trying to create a perfect society, and that just can't happen. He won't be able to. And so it was that line right there, there is no God, that's why I stepped in. It's something that he can't fulfill. So he's just, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And that's what he did with, at least what we know of, 93 batches of these experiments.
Well, he said they've been doing this for hundreds of years,
right?
Too.
So,
which, and it still hasn't worked clearly. So,
well, I think that it speaks to the idea that we want perfection. Mm-hmm. We want that utopia. See, it's this whole idea. We are trying to create a utopian society. The problem is it's a utopian society by our design.
Right.
And it fails, right? I mean, it fails on Counter Earth. You see that. They illustrate that with the, they're driving Peter and it's Nebula, right?
Whoa.
What scene are you referring to?
When they're driving to the pyramid thing.
Yeah, it's Groot, Nebula, and Quill.
Yeah.
They're driving to it, right? And they see drug sales, they see homelessness, they see abuse, they see all of these things, and we cannot create a perfect society, and yet we so long to try to create. We see the brokenness in the world around us, and we want it to be fixed, right? But then who gets to determine what's right and wrong? And that's the society issue that we struggle with. When you take God Almighty, right? Because again, we come from all of this with the worldview that there is a God, right? And he is completely perfect and completely in control, right? And so you take that out of it and you just have man trying to step into the role of God, which is exactly, goes all the way back to the beginning of the story in the Bible about, you take this fruit, you get to make the decision, you get to make the choice about your own life, your own destiny, which is sort of a theme in this as well, with it, but you take control, right? And then you get to be just like God, is what Satan said in the garden to Adam and Eve. So how do we deal with the reality that, and I think this is commentary, and I know you guys talked about it on the podcast yesterday, Nate, but there's this idea of, well, if there is a God, why do we have this brokenness, right? If there is a God, a true God, why is it when I drive down my street, I can imagine James Gunn literally living this moment out while he was thinking about this question, driving through Hollywood. Yeah. Right, driving through Los Angeles, because we've lived close enough. We've driven through it a lot, and you see homelessness, you see prostitution, you see drugs, you see insanity, you see violence, you see brokenness everywhere. I can imagine James Gunn driving through town saying, "If there is a God, why is this going on?" How do you think? What are your thoughts on that in this movie?
Brokenness exists because we are broken, but we're broken by choice. We chose as a species to be broken. And you can sit there and point the finger at Adam and Eve all day, but given that choice, I think we all would have done the same thing. But because God loves us, he gives us that choice. So while we thought we knew it was right, we really in the end chose brokenness, but God allows us to live in that brokenness because he loves us and he wants us to be able to make that choice for ourselves. But he gives us a way out through his son.
What are your thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, I think that it shows that everybody's broken and nobody can be perfect, which is the whole idea of this movie. Nobody can be perfect. And we can try our best to be perfect, but we'll never reach that. But we can try to be better. And so that's really what this movie is showing, that there is brokenness, and there always will be. But we can at least try to be better people about it and try to do more. And so we really we feel like we see, the drug dealing and the assault and all of this stuff every day, and homelessness, and we wonder, well, if there's a God, why are we seeing all of this pain? And that's just the way that it's become, and that's how it's going to be. But we can always look for hope, and that's what we have, and there is hope. And so that's really what it shows a lot in this movie, that there's more to it than just being imperfect. And your imperfections make you human. They make you people. And that's what made all those people on that planet a civilization. Was their brokenness. You can't have a perfect civilization, because that just wouldn't work. There wouldn't be a civilization at that point. And so having all of this, you have the good and the bad. And we were talking about this, I think, about Star Wars, and how there will always be a good and a bad, and there's nothing that can change that. And so that really shows it here of what the case is. So
yeah, I would say that this really does cause thoughts and questions, and the idea of being able to wrestle with some really deep questions. And the question of, if there is truly a God, why is there evil? Right. And why is there brokenness in this world? And this movie, whether or not James Gunn understood he was trying to answer this question himself, he did answer it. And the answer is, it's the goodness of God that allows for humanity to have the freedom to choose to reject him, and to choose to live in rebellion against his ways, right? Because the high evolutionary is trying to force his will on all these societies, all these creations, all these earths, right? He's trying to force their conformity. He's trying to force their allegiance. He's trying to force all of those things, instead of invite them into that allegiance, invite them into that utopian existence, right? And so it's the goodness of God that allows humanity the freedom to live in rebellion against him, and in rebellion against his ways. The Bible says, there's in 2 Peter, it says, do not mistake the patience of the Lord, of God, for like his impotence, basically, is what he's saying. He's not his delay in dealing with sin is not him not desiring to deal with it. It's his patience in waiting for all to come to repentance, right? All to turn to him with it. The thing that this movie doesn't answer is a solution to the problem. It never gives a solution to the problem. The answer in this movie is, there is no answer. We're all broken. We're all imperfect beings. So just do the best that you can. Go find your truth. Go find your purpose. Go live it out. And that's not the solution. See, the reality is, the one true God did deal with the problem of evil. He became a human, and he poured out the judgment and wrath that we deserved upon himself, so that he could continue to extend mercy, continue to extend grace, continue to extend love to all of humanity, and open up an invitation for us to move out of our sin, out of our brokenness, into relationship. And he promises a day when he will fully deal with sin and restore us to the existence that we truly were created for, our true purpose with it. And that's one of the things that's interesting about all of these movies, is because we say it at the beginning of most every episode. We didn't in this one, but these stories are the mythology of our world, of our life, of our era, of this time. And there is something on our hearts that speaks to these things. And so whether or not James Gunn knows it, he's searching for the answers to all of these problems with it.
Yeah. Good dad moment.
What's that?
Good dad moment.
I guess we can wrap it up with that dad moment with it. Yeah. I mean, it is a Sunday.
It is.
So I guess we'll just throw the full-on gospel presentation in the middle of this one today. We'll close off with this. The post-credit scene. You had 2 post-credit scenes. The first one is sort of the revelation of the new Guardians of the Galaxy. What are your thoughts? I mean, that's what that is, right?
Right.
What are your thoughts on?
I mean, we'll have to see how the new team is. It looks like it could be interesting. I like the characters. It's great that we have Rocket and now King Groot in there to kind of allow some ties to the old group, but give some new life to it. I'm excited to see where it goes. I think it'll be fun.
What'd you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they can pull off the same chemistry that the first group had. That was really what made the Guardians work. It wasn't who the characters were or what their abilities were. It was their chemistry and how they were as a team. So it'll be interesting to see that because it is a much more varied group. I mean, you've got 2 animals, a tree, immature Superman, and a kid, you know?
and Blurb.
Huh?
Can't forget about Blurb.
Blurb?
Yeah, the little furry.
The little mini loaf cat. It kind of looks like a loaf cat.
That's what it's called, Blurb?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Well, that.
Or
so
Blurg or Blurg. One of those.
So it'll be interesting to see, but I like it. I like that Rocket's leading it. I think Adam Warlock could be a pretty interesting character if they can continue to develop him. So, yeah.
And then we had the final post-credit scene, which is really just Peter Quill acting like a get off my lawn old guy, eating a bowl of cereal, which I thought that was fun.
That was.
But it's the thing that happens after that I think is the biggest moment of the post-credit scenes, which is the legendary Star-Lord will return. I know Nate and I have talked a little bit about this, but Sam, I don't think you and I have talked about it. What do you think that means?
I mean, at face value, it just means that we're not done with Star-Lord, but as to a larger story, I'm not sure. I mean, it's tough to say just because I can't think of any off the top of my head any further storyline connections that he has, like threads they can pull on for another plot. Granted, I'm not super familiar with this character in the comics, so I can't exactly, say that, he's got another, like the Ego storyline that they pulled out, I can't think of anything similar to that for them to work off. But, I mean, it's exciting. He's a cool character. Chris Pratt, like we mentioned earlier, is a great actor. So, I'm glad that they're not done with this character. And I'm sure they're not done with all the other Guardians that we say goodbye to in this movie either.
What about you, Nate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's going to lead to more things. Maybe a solo movie, maybe a movie with Gamora and Nebula, possibly. I think we can see that. Maybe a Ravagers movie. I don't know. We'll have to see. Maybe a Ravagers TV show or something. I don't know. We'll have to see how it goes. Cool. But no, I mean, we're going to see him again. Maybe it's just he comes back in Kang Dynasty and Secret Wars, but it'll be interesting to see where he comes. What would you guys think about a legendary Star-Lord solo movie? I would like it, honestly. Yeah. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, he's such a solid actor and stuff. I think he can pull off a solo movie well, and it would, again, work better with the character now that they're all kind of sure of themselves and now have to kind of go and, do their own thing.
I am your father.
It's not a major revelation when we talk about the presence of gods in the MCU. Every major story arc has led to confrontations with them. Loki in the original Avengers movie. Thanos isn't necessarily considered a god. I know there's debate there, but there's no doubt that he's got a god complex. He wants to eliminate half of the entire universe's population to stop overpopulation. So, and then you have He Who Remains from the Loki series. He's a human, but he's grown so overwhelmingly intelligent that he believes that he's got the right to determine what timeline should or should not remain in existence. You have the Eternals. They're literally the gods of ancient mythology. And then, of course, in the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the High Evolutionary. He is about creating and destroying entire civilizations as experiments in a twisted attempt at establishing a utopia. It absolutely fascinates me that the most financially successful film franchise of all time so clearly speaks to the story written on our souls. It might be a good idea to take time to stop and ask ourselves why we feel so drawn to stories like this, and maybe even why it seems we always want to make the gods in these stories the villains. Thanks for listening to Tatooine Sons, a pop culture podcast. I know we mentioned it at the top of the show, but can't be more excited than we are about the launch of the Christian Nerd HQ podcast network. There's podcasts dropping on that feed all the time. Mondays, the Christian Nerds Unite podcast with Ricky Pope. Of course, Tuesday is when our episodes release every single week. Wednesday, so that's coming tomorrow, is Fangirling Over Jesus with Ashley Cox, where she looks at nerdy pop culture things and helps us see them from a very spiritual, like real world application level. So I'm excited about that. Thursdays, we've got the Reverend and the Reprobate. You guys, if you haven't checked them out, they're basically two guys that have no business having the conversations, talking to the people that they're talking to, but it somehow works. So check them out. And then all throughout the week, we're going to have things happening on the YouTube channel and on video streams as well. So there's lots of content. Make sure you're following us on all of our social media channels at Tatooine Sons, SONS. Check out Christian Nerd HQ on all the different social networks, because that's the handle on there, Christian Nerd HQ. And then give us a rating and review on whatever podcast app you're listening to us on. We truly appreciate that. And then if you like what you hear, share it with the world. Get the word out, not just about Tatooine Sons, but about all the other shows on the Christian Nerd HQ and the network itself. We can't wait to see what comes in the future. I think that'll do it for this week. But of course,
may the force be with you always.
This party's over.
I like that Wookiee.
Don't get technical with me.